Jeff Slauson here from 19 News Now at the 19 News Digital Desk. Senate Bill 1 has become a very controversial bill that has passed the Ohio Senate, heads to the Ohio House, and then potentially to the Ohio governor's desk. Now, this is a bill that's been in the process of trying to get passed for a couple of years now. Last year it was held up in the House, might not happen this year. Essentially what this does is a massive overhaul of the higher education system in the state of Ohio, requiring the public colleges, community colleges, universities to abide by a new, more strict set of rules. And the main three that I think are really important here: it would ban all DEI, diversity, inclusion initiatives. So essentially anybody that is involved in DEI, which has become a very hot button issue, would be let go. Any scholarships that are awarded to certain genders or races would no longer be allowed. Basically, it would eliminate that in its entirety. It would also not allow any teachers to strike, and it would also ban quote-unquote controversial topics from being discussed opinionated. Basically, it'd have to be done only in fact, and it would have to allow for all sides to be discussed. We spoke yesterday with the sponsor of this bill, Jerry Serino, brought up all of these issues with him. Let's take a listen.
Well, it's not really going to be that long process. I mean, it's Senate Bill 1. The fact that it's Senate Bill 1 speaks to it as a priority bill for the Senate. This is a new legislative session that we just started in January. So we any bills that didn't make it in the last General Assembly, if they were going to get resubmitted, they have to start over again. And so this bill, Senate Bill 1, is a priority bill for the Senate. It passed in record time, and it will now go over to the House, where I expect it's going to move swiftly through the House. So it will not be a long process.
That's unique for politics in some areas there. When it comes to this bill in particular, if you don't mind, explain exactly what the purpose of it is and some of the specifics, if you can.
Well, the purpose is to enhance and improve and reform higher education in Ohio. And when I talk about higher education, we're talking about the 14 public universities and the 22 community colleges that are state-supported institutions. It does not include private colleges and universities around Ohio. There's plenty of those. Hopefully they will follow our lead on some of these policy issues. But it's really designed to, we have great universities and we need them for Ohio's continued economic development. But very often, many of these universities have veered off of what I consider to be their really original mission and their main mission, and that is to teach students in an environment that is inclusive of diverse opinions, diversity of thought, as opposed to more of an orthodoxy that is a mono-orthodoxy that is practiced on the university and college campuses, that does not expose students to different political types of issues.
On the floor, you had mentioned what you termed the term institutional discrimination related to this. Can you explain what exactly you mean by that?
Sure. Well, that relates to the DEI part of the bill. Now, the bill it's not a DEI bill. It has a dozen other key areas of reform in our colleges and universities. But the DEI part of it is an important one. It's getting a lot of attention in the national news today, certainly this week with what the president's doing. We were addressing and concerned about DEI's direction 3 years ago when we started working on Senate Bill 83, the predecessor bill. And what's happened is that, just like in the Supreme Court's decision on admissions a year ago this past June, that said you cannot discriminate based on race in granting admissions, our Attorney General has given us guidance that applies to scholarships and other things as well. And Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, I think, put it beautifully. He said, if you want to stop discrimination, stop discrimination. And you can't discriminate against people in order to make up for past discrimination that has occurred with other groups of people. Discrimination in and of itself is wrong when it's based on race, gender, or religion. And so this bill attempts to, and what it will do when it's signed into law, begin dismantling the DEI structures that is inside of our universities and community colleges.
I want to stick on the DEI portion of this before I move to others, because as you mentioned, yeah, this is becoming one of the higher button parts of it here. Would that involve eliminating not only the processes behind it, but also any individual that is responsible for anything related to DEI at these universities?
Yeah, it would, for things that are strictly related to DEI, it would be the departments, the infrastructure, the people with titles that they're doing DEI things. It does not include, sometimes embedded in those DEI departments are things like Veterans Affairs or other things that are not DEI related, and as well as compliance offices that have to make sure that the institution is compliant with various federal programs and Title VI and Title IX, things that they have always had to keep an eye on, and they have to report on their progress and on their stats to the federal government. So it doesn't obliterate everything, but things that are related to preferring one group versus another, it will not be allowed.
Something like a scholarship that would go to a certain race or gender or whatever, is that eliminated in this?
It's eliminated from the universities. Now, individual donors can still offer scholarships that are focused on, any criteria that they want. It's the donor's responsibility, but the institution itself cannot favor one group over another.
Yeah, because DEI can be such a broad term. That's what we're discussing in a meeting today. So I do think it's important to find specific labels for it as well. That does spawn into additional parts of this, where I believe you had mentioned it on the floor in addition to this, but the idea of presenting both sides, or the availability for people to have express different views in that when it comes to certain topics or studying and things like that. If you could explain that more.
Sure. Many of the opponents of this bill have, unfortunately, either purposely misunderstood the bill or didn't do enough homework on the bill, that all topics can be discussed. This is not a restriction of speech bill, okay? It actually enhances speech. It creates more speech opportunities. And any topic can be discussed. All we're saying in the bill is that faculty members, when they're teaching a class, need to accommodate people that might have different opinions, and that students should be in a position to feel comfortable in expressing contrary opinions to the professor, let's say, or to other students in the class. We're not forbidding any topics from being discussed. The only thing that is forbidden is for institutions to take a public position on issues. We call that institutional neutrality. And that was practiced in academia around the country for a very, very long time. They have gotten away from that and have felt the need very often to chime in on major issues in our society, and that's not their role. Their role is to be neutral. Individuals, professors, administrators can have their own private opinion, certainly, and they have a First Amendment right to do that. But they cannot represent the institution and take a position on some of these issues.
Things like history, for instance, does that need to be presented with both sides, or
no? History can present it as it is history, but if somebody questions the history, if somebody says, a ridiculous example would be, let's say somebody says I think the Earth is really flat. Right. Okay. Hopefully the professor won't spend much time on that one, but the student, as dumb an idea as that is, they can suggest that. And the professor's responsibility is to clarify with the abundance of facts to the contrary that the student has the wrong opinion, and then leave it at that. It does not mean that a professor would have to also provide a theory that the world is flat.
How would something like this be enforced? If I understand the explanation or the reference that you just gave there, outlandish, but if something like that hypothetically were to take place in a classroom, how would it be enforced to ensure that that professor would provide factual basis to respond to the student and not just an opinion of I think it is?
Well, we're not going to ask for cameras in the classroom. Certainly, that would be ridiculous. But in the process of faculty evaluations, those kinds of things, if there are situations where they have veered off from the intent of this law, certainly in the student evaluations, or very often professors will have peers from their departments doing audits periodically, sitting in on their classes and that sort of thing. But it really is, that's why the periodic evaluations of the faculty members is so important, because that's when you would likely uncover that there's some pattern of misbehavior that is not in coordination with the law that we passed today.
I want to move on to some other parts of this bill if we can here. The striking prohibition for staff members, for the employees, right, for teachers, professors. Can you explain that part of this?
Yes, sure. The no strike provision only applies to faculty, full-time faculty. Here's how I explain this typically. When a student signs up for a semester of classes, they pay whatever the dollar amount is, right? What they're getting for that payment is instruction for whatever number of courses they've signed up for. Okay, that is a contract that exists between the student and the university, but because these are state institutions, it's also with the state. So they are two parties. One has given consideration, and the other has gotten a service in trade for that. Why on earth would we allow a third party, i.e. a faculty labor organization, interrupt the delivery of the goods that student has already paid for, just because they want a better contract, or they want a better dental plan, or a longer sabbatical period, or something like that? This is not an anti-labor bill at all. I believe in supporting labor, but I don't believe that they have the right to go in and interrupt or threaten to interrupt the delivery of instruction to a student that they have already paid for.
Yeah, that has led to detractors saying that this bill is anti-union. It seems that you don't agree.
No, I don't agree. I mean, as you may know, I came from the private sector before coming to the Senate, and I dealt with unions, labor unions, in many of my companies, and we managed to get along well and get things done. I ran a company in Buffalo, and we had the steel workers there. The steel workers in Buffalo, they are a tough union, and we managed to coexist and work on common goals. And I would never try to get rid of that union. I'm a believer in the right to organize labor. Okay, certainly. But what I don't believe is that a third party should be able to come in and interrupt that agreement that has been made between the institution.
Born and raised in Buffalo, reported there as well. I know very much so the strength of that union there. That is a massive backbone of that economy.
Yes.
The civics course, the 3-hour mandatory civics course here. Explain why you believe that's important.
Well, if you want to go out and talk to millennials these days and ask them questions, I often see these man on the street sort of interviews where various hosts will ask questions of people on the street. And if you believe the answers, some of them are pretty pathetic. People don't know the basics of our country, our history, and in some cases, even world events that have occurred. And we need to make sure that we're trying to make up for that lack of knowledge, and required to get a bachelor's degree in the state of Ohio at a public university, that you need to have at least a 3-hour course in American history, civics, studying the founding documents, the American capitalistic economy, et cetera, those kinds of things. So that if you're an architecture major, unless you go out of your way to take elective courses in government or history, you're not going to be exposed to any of that stuff. And we want to make sure that happens. We think we'll be better off for it as a country. We did allow the presidents of the universities to have the flexibility to waive that requirement if somebody comes to their university and they took CCP, College Credit Plus programs, or other courses that might be equivalent. They're in a position to waive that 3-hour requirement.
The last bit that I have here before, just one more quick question after that, is the controversial belief section as well. Will there be a defined kind of listing of what are considered quote unquote controversial beliefs? Is that going to be an ever-changing list? How does that work?
It's not necessary, because we use that we use the controversial issues which it was not an exhaustive list, and it will change. 2 years from now, there will be controversial issues we don't know about today, right? So that's a moving target, and it was sent to be an example of how the institution needs to avoid those subjects in taking an institutional position. It was not intended to, nor does it limit that those topics cannot be discussed in the classroom. Absolutely, they can. We're just asking to make sure that intellectual diversity is accommodated when it comes up in the classroom.
Sorry, so was it more so highlighting those as specific ones that could be seen as problematic?
I mean, if the institutions take official positions on those controversial issues or other ones that we didn't list there, we think that's wrong. We think that they need to be institutionally neutral on issues, and we make a couple of exceptions in the bill. But we just, so that's really, it has been misinterpreted, sometimes purposefully, by opponents of the bill, that we are limiting what can be talked about in the classroom. And that is absolutely not the case.
The last question I have for you, I don't know if there was a lot of discussion between some presidents of universities, things like that. If there was, though, what type of reaction did they have? What type of input did they have on the potential for this bill and for what they wanted to be seen or didn't want to have on it?
Well, I've been working with the university presidents and the community college presidents. I did on 83, the previous bill, predecessor bill, and I continue to have great relationships with them. We speak often. We meet often. We've had lots of feedback from them. They made suggestions in 83 and in Senate Bill 1, either individually or through their organization. And we've taken a lot of input from them. And I think, quite frankly, they don't see this as some of our opponents did on the floor today, that this was going to totally destroy our universities in Ohio. Well, if that's the case, why would the university presidents and their organization be neutral on this bill? If they thought it was going to be completely destructive to their institutions, do you think they would be quiet and just let this bill happen? Of course not. They see that this is going to give them a great deal of helpful, not only information, but a helpful policy flexibility to run their organizations better, making sure that we meet the needs of our students and our hiring businesses for a long time to come.
So this will now head to the Ohio House. If it's passed there, governor has the potential to sign it, and then it would be into law. I have a full breakdown on this available on our website at cleveland19.com. Highly suggest looking there for the latest in this and the other stories of the day. For now, I'm Jeff Slauson with 19 News. Have a great night. Much more to come, both on air and online.
19 News, now streaming on Samsung Smart.